Well, hello, this is Yuris Kaja talking to you again from Riga as usual. Um, the past weekend was kind of an anniversary weekend. It was August 23rd on Sunday, and that is the day when in 1939 the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed, dividing Europe between the Soviets and the Nazis, with Latvia going over to the Soviet side, and the following summer in 1940 being occupied by the Soviet Union with practically no resistance by a relatively well organized and adequately armed Latvian military. The president of Latvia at the time, the authoritarian leader Kārlis Ulmanis, said, well, we just sort of welcome in the Soviets, and I will stay in my place and you will stay in yours. Palieciet savās vietās, es palikšu savā vietā. That was the Latvian phrase that he used. Anyway, 31 years ago was the Baltic chain. Around 2 million people held hands from Tallinn in Estonia all the way down into Lithuania on the 23rd to demonstrate for the right of the three Baltic republics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, to restore their independence, which they did actually do in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. However, this date took on a special significance this year because in Latvia and in Lithuania, people organized solidarity human chains to support the struggle in Belarus to get rid of the dictator Alexander Lukashenko and to hold new free presidential elections and also to free political prisoners and punish those responsible for incredibly brutal repression in the days right after the August 9th presidential election, when people took to the streets and thousands were arrested, and many of those tortured and beaten in jails by police and special police or OMON units. If you ask me, I would not be the first one to wring my hands and carry on if something sort of went completely south in the Belarus and the OMON units ended up being simply taken out into the woods and shot. This happened after the concentration camps were liberated in Germany. Some of the shooting was done by the inmates, given weapons by American and British soldiers. Some of the shooting was done by the soldiers themselves, and you really can sort of understand why they did it. Obviously, the right thing to do would be to take a lot of these people to be tried in The Hague and whatever else, is the right way to do things. But that's sort of the way one feels after seeing the videos of all these seriously beaten people and women describing how they were threatened with rape and other forms of sexual abuse. So I don't think that we should worry too much about the right to stay alive of anyone in the Belarusian security services. So anyway, what happened in Latvia was that the young people's organization called Protests.lv and a couple of other non-governmental organizations got together and organized a march along the Latvian-Belarusian border, a 70-kilometer section, and I think the march was done in kind of segments because 70 kilometers is a pretty long distance to march. It's sort of like close to the 50-mile marches that became kind of popular under, I vaguely remember, under President Kennedy in the U.S. You'd go on a 50-mile hike and you were a hero. But in this case, the march ended at a border point in a place called Piedruja, which is across the river, the river Daugava, forming the border between Latvia and Belarus, where kind of a little rally was held and a kind of human chain of a few hundred meters long was formed between downtown Piedruja, if I'm saying that with a bit of irony, it's a little village, and the riverbank, where there is a border marker. And they stood, the small group of about 100 or 130 demonstrators stood there and waved the free Belarusian white, red, white flags and sang a few songs, which probably could be heard across the river. A few curiosity seekers came out on the Belarusian side, where I think the village is called Druya, Piedruya, meaning the village next to Druya. So I don't know how the two got separated, but and a boat with some Belarusian border guards, kind of a rubber dinghy with a motor, went by as well. So then these folks from Latvia proceeded down to Vilnius, many of them, to take part in a human chain between the Lithuanian capital and the Belarusian border. And some 50,000 people participated in this, and this was a major, huge event, and it took place at roughly the same time as, by some estimates, up to 250,000 people gathered in Minsk alone, and there were, of course, gatherings in other Belarusian cities, to ask that President Lukashenko resign and hold new elections and release political prisoners and the whole list of reasonable demands. Lukashenko ended up running around waving a AK-47 weapon along with his 15-year-old son, and mocked the demonstrators and was cheered on by a large contingent of his special forces police. These are the guys that, as I said, maybe should end up in the woods with somebody pointing a pistol at the back of their heads, but that's probably not going to happen. However, the irony of it is, if we look back at what happened to Ceausescu in Romania, maybe Lukashenko was waving the instrument of his own final demise. It would be kind of rough justice, but again, this is a time when dictators actually should be put on a proper trial in The Hague or wherever. And hopefully, unlike some of the Balkan people, if he is caught and if he is taken to The Hague, that he will not sort of hurry up and die before being sentenced for what he has done in Belarus. The Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhonovskaya still remains in Lithuania. And Lithuania, our neighbor country, has sort of become a center of solidarity for all that's happening in Belarus now, and the support for the freedom movement there. Anyway, that is that in Latvia and Lithuania over the weekend. We are now in the final run toward the Riga extraordinary municipal elections. Everybody is putting up ads and even sending personal messages on Facebook Messenger and in all kinds of other internet contexts, which again shows how political campaigning is shifted away from newspaper ads and posters in the streets and even TV advertising, though I've seen a few TV ads, but I think the TV ads are simply, repeated on Facebook, and you open your Facebook page and there is one of the many smiling candidates for mayor of Riga. Now, we are not electing the mayor of Riga here. We are electing the 60-member city council. There are 15 different political lists running for those 60 seats. And then that 60-member political council will try to elect someone as its chairman, who then will be sort of formally called the mayor of Riga. And the big problem is not that the old guard, the so-called Social Democratic Harmony Party, and the rather strangely named An Honor to Serve Riga, which has been renamed by some cynics as An Honor to Loot Riga, are not going to win. I mean, they're going to be defeated in the sense that they will not gain a majority. The problem is going to be putting together a reasonable coalition, where we have also seen a few black humor incidents. Now, the National Alliance, together with the Latvian Regional Alliance, which is a party actually for everybody outside of Riga, but for some reason they're running, to be on the Riga City Council, stated in their election introductory sort of when they registered and announced they were running for city council, that Riga would not be a city of prides and rainbow things and so forth and so on. Whereupon the National Alliance parliamentarian, a young lawyer, a pretty smart guy, but apparently not smart enough, put up a poll on Twitter saying, what kind of Riga would you want? Like a Riga of pride and a Riga of a few other categories. Anyway, the category, a Riga of pride marches, or whatever, Pride Riga, whatever that means, a Riga of pride. Not a proud Riga. Riga should be proud of itself for its accomplishments. That goes without saying. So it backfired. One of the main pillars of the National Alliance campaign against holding any kind of LGBT events in the city backfired, with about 80% of those responding to a Twitter poll. Now, Twitter polls are Twitter polls, but sort of ended up saying, yeah, they want a Pride Riga. Why not have a big party? That is what Pride marches seem to be in a lot of other places in Europe, Berlin or London or Stockholm or wherever, so. There are these weird little black humor ironies all the way up to the last days of the campaign. And yes, everybody is everywhere. People are going around to various districts and regions of Riga, which is a good idea, because one of the points that everybody's sort of making is that neighborhoods should not be neglected, and that they should have a say in what happens there, and so forth and so on. And well, we shall see where the vote goes. Today, it is on a Tuesday that I'm talking to you. The Latvian government is going to decide on individual targeted sanctions on Belarus. That meeting is going on as I speak to you. And I'll see what Lithuania and Estonia are doing, because all three of these countries declared that they would sort of set their own sanctions, and then they would wait for the European Union to set maybe a broader or somewhat differently accented set of sanctions, keeping the people responsible for what happened in Belarus from traveling to the West, maybe seizing some of their assets in Western banks. We'll see how it ends up. Anyway, that's all I have to say from here in Riga, where the weather is kind of starting to reek or feel of fall, with rain and clouds outside. And, well, talk to you again soon.